Well, more on those headline stories for you a little bit later. The Mandela name has been in the media of late for all the wrong reasons. First, ANC leaders were accused of parading Madiba in public to earn political points. Then, the Mandela daughters went to court over money generated by his trust fund. So what has happened to the brand known as Mandela? Oh, Charlene Smith, a huge pleasure to have the veteran journalist with us, not only in South Africa, but indeed on the show, has also written a biography on Madiba. Charlene, morning to you. Always wonderful to have you in person. We always talk on the telephone when you're over in the US and other parts of the world. Joe Slovo, celebrating his birthday today, the late Joe Slovo. How would he feel about just generally what is happening with Madiba and the family?
I think he would feel the way many of us feel. I think he would want to put his head down and weep at the state of this nation. This was supposed to be a non-racial, non-sexist nation. The level of crime against women, the new racism that's coming up. I mean, what's it about? I mean, have we progressed no further? I mean, Hendrik Verwoerd must be lying in his grave and laughing at us as a country and saying, you stupid people, you've gone back to apartheid. You haven't progressed at all. And then if we look at the way that we're treating Nelson Mandela, and particularly coming from his family, it's disgraceful. He hasn't even died, and his daughters are fighting over money. We had Ronald Reagan who had Alzheimer's. We had Maggie Thatcher who had Alzheimer's. We didn't have their children or their family parading Maggie Thatcher or Ronald Reagan like circus animals. We didn't have George Bush standing smiling next to Ronald Reagan when he had Alzheimer's. You're referring to the incident
where he was filmed inside his house with all the government officials around,
yeah.
And many people upset by that particular footage. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm talking about that. And what makes me really sad is that Cyril Ramaphosa, who's been a very old friend of mine for a very long time, but he was the man that Mandela wanted to be president. Mandela loved Ramaphosa and Zuma. And for them to take him out as a circus animal.
It's funny you mentioned the visuals that the public broadcaster aired. Similar scenes in a photo that you were involved in a while ago. I know we're going to bring it up now. Grant, my technical director, is going to bring up this photo here. Take us through what you're seeing. It's just next to you, Charlene. The photo, very similar, Madiba, Zuma, Ramaphosa, but there you are in the middle, different time.
A completely different time. That was in 1999. That was I've written 2 biographies on Mandela. That was the first one. It was a very happy event. I mean, if you look at him there, my son is blonde. He got up at one stage, he jived with my son. I mean, when we look at Mandela and we look at him there, that's the man that we need to remember and love. He came out of prison, he forgave, he reconciled, he showed love to his family. His family is his Achilles heel. He expressed great regret for how they suffered and how the families of other people who were imprisoned in the way that he did, or who were tortured or who were murdered fighting apartheid, suffered. Many other families suffered. The Mandela family is now one of the wealthiest families in the country. I had friends on death row who were political prisoners who now live in poverty. So there are people who benefited from their suffering and there are people who are in poverty because of their suffering. But I think the bottom line is this: the way that the Mandela family is behaving now insults his name and it insults our country. And living in the United States, where there's a great deal of love and respect for Mandela, and the way that people are looking at South Africa and South Africans now, and that the way that we're treating Mandela, it shames us. It shames us as a nation.
You can't talk about the Mandela name. Of course, we're talking about Nelson Madiba himself, of course, but the big news at the moment is the way Winnie Mandela seems to have gotten herself into a fair amount of trouble of late as well. That's also not the sort of legacy or dynasty I imagine the Mandelas want to be associated with or leave behind.
Well, Winnie Mandela in the 60s and 70s behaved with a great deal of dignity and graciousness and did so much that was positive for the anti-apartheid act. But from the 80s, she started behaving badly. And we now have allegations of murder, lots of allegations of fraud. She's been convicted. But the most recent event where the sheriffs of the court went to her house because she hadn't paid school fees, she'd already received half of the bill off. She didn't pay school fees. If it was anyone else, they would have broken down our door. And I was listening to on Radio Metro on Tuesday night with callers in. The announcer was saying, oh, you know, the sheriffs shouldn't have gone to the house of Mama Mandela. And callers were phoning in and saying, but why not?
It's a sheriff.
Why should she be different? Why should all the rest of us have to pay and she can get away with it?
We're talking Winnie Mandela, but I want to bring you back to the daughters that were over in America. And while I do that, I know Grant, our TD, will bring up the photo of you and Madiba sitting on a couch. It's a beautiful image, black and white image from many, many years ago. Here it is, it's coming up behind us. A moment you'll remember as well. I only met Madiba very briefly at Parliament once. You know him intimately. How do you think, and I know we can't imagine what Madiba thinks, I know we can't. How do you think he feels about his daughters doing what they're doing?
I think Mandela's heart is broken, and I think it's been broken for a long time. When he divorced Winnie Mandela, this photograph was taken on his first day back in Soweto. It was the third day after he'd been released. I interviewed him 4 times that week. But I think when he divorced Winnie, and that was 2 years after he came out, he said that those 2 years had been the saddest period of his life. Then he married Grace Michelle when he was 85, and joy seemed to come back into his life. But the conduct of his children and grandchildren for many years has been a source of grieving and grief and concern to him. And because he loves them so much, he's tried to get around it. But I mean, there have been things that have happened. A friend of mine who was on one of the foundation's boards in a foreign country resigned from that board after the foundation was asked to pay for a boob job for one of the daughters. That's not the purpose of his legacy.
No, it's not. And just as we briefly wrap up, a final answer from you, if you could, Charlene. How should the daughters now get themselves out of this? They obviously are aware of the public storm. Briefly as you can, how do you fix the image? How do you fix the brand of Madiba now?
The family needs to start behaving in a respectful manner. You didn't have the family of Maggie Thatcher or Ronald Reagan, the children fighting over the money before he was dead. It's disgusting. They all have lots and lots of money. Why do they need more money? The legacy of the foundations is to help the people of South Africa, to give back to the people that he loved, not for the daughters to spend more money in shopping malls.
Charlene, always a pleasure to have you in as well. Someone who knows Madiba incredibly well. Veteran journalist, a pleasure to have her on the show. Charlene Smith with us on eNCA.
News that moves. eNCA.com.